Well, finally here we are on the topic of cases. It's been a long time since I've made a case investing video, and the reason for that is because case investing is sort of just pseudo-investing. People who treat case investing like it's something that's really hard to do are wrong. It's not really something that's complicated. It doesn't have a lot of moving parts. It's just something that is fairly straightforward. Cases are an item that is a consumable, and it's also an item that will always get rarer over time. So the main thing about them is that they're pretty much always going to rise in price, albeit at different levels. That's why I consider them pseudo-investing and not really investing. That being said, I would be a fool to not recognize the merit of them as an investment because they've performed very well over the past few years, and that's just really a factor that I can't overlook. So that being said, I am here making this case investing guide just to show you guys how it works and why it works and what you should actually go for. There's actually a brand new case released, the Fracture case, as of the recording of this video, and the Fracture case is a really interesting one because it has a lot of really cool skins in it, but unfortunately is only going to be expensive for the short period of time while it's still pretty limited. The problem with new cases like the Prisma 2 case and the Fracture case is that they're only really expensive at the very beginning because there aren't enough of them in circulation to meet the demand. So the main problem is these cases end up just declining in price all the way down to around 4 cents, and then they rise from there. The sponsor for today's video is going to be Skinport. Skinport is a really awesome site with a beautiful UI and a beautiful amount of skins to match. This is going to be a great site to use if you want to go ahead and invest into skins because you're going to be able to get them at a pretty large discount off, which is only going to increase your margin of profit. The site features over 100,000 skins in its inventory and has one of the best inventories of any third-party marketplace out there. It also has really great discounts and a lot of really awesome items that you can go ahead and look into just by checking out the link in the description below. And by using my link, you're also supporting the channel directly, which is a really awesome thing to do. Anyway, be sure to check them out if you are interested in that amazing site, and let's get into this video. And that's going to be the first topic of this video, new cases. So new cases you should almost never invest in. There's always going to be a more optimal choice, even though technically you could buy into a new case and just hold it for a super long period of time, and then eventually you would make profit just because of how cases function as an item in CSGO, but as a whole, you should really just be looking for a more optimal investment instead of buying into new cases as an investment itself. So for example, Prisma 2 and also the Fracture case are pretty much only going to decline from the current prices that they're at, and they're not really going to get more expensive. And that's the main thing with cases. With the new cases especially, people are just going to get them as drops in game, and they're pretty much going to be free to get. So the main problem is that they're going to flood the market, which is going to overrule the pretty high demand and cause the case to just decline. And that's it for new cases. That's really all there is to it. The new cases are just not going to be a good investment because there's always going to be a more optimal choice. The next topic of this video is going to be operation cases. So this includes cases from Operation Bravo all the way up to Operation Shattered Web. So Shattered Web is going to be a pretty interesting one, but as for the other cases, they're pretty much always going to be good choices because they are very limited in nature and are not readily available in game. In fact, the Shattered Web case itself seems to be totally discontinued as no one has really been shown to get a rare drop of it. On the topic of the Bravo case, despite it being a really expensive case, already around $33, it's actually shown a really solid uptrend over its lifetime growth, and it's going to be one that's just going to continue to rise as it gets more and more rare. The Operation Breakout case is the next one I want to talk about in detail because it's been a really solid go-to option for a lot of people trying to get into the case marketplace. With the Operation Breakout case, obviously, it doesn't really have a whole lot of great skins inside of it. It does have one amazing thing about it though, and that's the fact that you get a guaranteed butterfly knife when you get a knife out of the case. This has been a pretty big draw to the case actually in terms of opening it, and it's shown a really solid rise. Around this time last year it was worth around 30 cents, and right now it's worth around 95 cents to $1, which is a really solid rise of around 70 cents. The detail that you want to look for here is of course the fact that the breakout case has risen steadily despite not having so many good skins inside of the case itself, and that's actually a very interesting topic. Now that's going to be basically how skins affect the cases as an investment overall, which is a little bit more complicated because it kind of depends on community opinion about those skins. So for example, with the Phoenix case, that one has a lot of really solid skins inside of it that the community loves, some all-time greats like the Op Asimov and also the AK Redline, so that case is a really good go-to option, and honestly it's a pretty underpriced right now. With the breakout case, you obviously just have the butterfly knife as the main draw, but because it's the best knife in the game and it's a guaranteed drop from the breakout case, it's been a really big draw for a lot of people. Now the next operation case that's been pretty interesting is the Operation Hydra case. Now the Hydra case has seen a really big draw and a really big dramatic increase in price for reasons that a lot of people already know. I feel like I don't have to go into a ton of detail about the reasoning behind the Hydra case doing so solid, but it is going to be one that is just going to continue to rise in price in the future, as it is very, very limited. And the final unique case from the operations cases is going to be the Shadow Web case, which I said was interesting, and that's for a very specific reason. As we know right now, the Shadow Web case is actually crashing pretty hard because the Fracture case released Shadow Web knives as its actual knives. With the Shadow Web case, one of the main draws for it was the fact that the knives in it were exclusive and were very, very expensive. They're way overpriced for their animations and how they compare to other knives, which made the Shadow Web case a very good option. I actually talked about this concept in detail in the video that you see up on screen right now about how the Shadow Web case had a lot of demand simply because the knives in it were exclusive. But the main problem now is that the Fracture case also offers the exact same knives with the exact same finishes, so it's now a lot more accessible to get those knives, meaning the Shadow Web case doesn't have as much of an interesting demand. Regardless, since the supply of the Shadow Web case is pretty much cut off at this point, I don't think it's going to do bad in the future, and I think it's still going to be a solid option going forward. The next interesting case to talk about are the Weapon Case 1, 2, and 3 from a long time ago in CSGO, which are a very interesting one because they are going to contain a lot of very rare and expensive skins like the Op Lightning Strike and the AK Case Hardened. These ones are going to be pretty solid options just because, like the other cases, they're very hard to obtain and they are very rare to get as drops in game, so they're pretty cut off in terms of supply. If you're looking at any of these in terms of investing, one of the best ones is going to be the Weapon Case 2. This one's already still pretty cheap because the contents of it aren't that flashy, but it does have some very interesting ones like the 5.7 Case Hardened, which can potentially be an insane pattern. There's also, of course, the blues, which are pretty easy to get and actually end up coming in Stat Track for whatever reason pretty easily as well, which means that these ones are also going to be pretty good profit margins even if you get a blue. The Weapon Case 2 actually yields really good profits when opening it, despite not really looking all that flashy, which is why I think it's going to be a good one to watch. And it has been showing an uptrend recently and was around $2 or even $1.80 last I recall, so now that it's up to about $3.50, it's a pretty interesting one. The Weapon Case 1 is another option. It's going to be a lot more expensive though, so getting a solid ROI out of it is going to be harder than cheaper cases. I would really only recommend this for people who have a lot of money to spend on cases themselves, and this one pretty much is only going to get rarer as time goes on as well. One of the rarest cases in the game and does rival the Bravo case in price, so there's a few really good things about it. It's also been showing a pretty solid uptrend recently and has had some price spikes which have shot it up quite a nice margin. When it comes to the three, Weapon Case 1, 2, and 3, I would actually just go with the Weapon Case 2. The other ones are not going to see the same sort of ROI and don't have the same sort of profit margins as a case in terms of opening it, and so those are going to be really good factors for the Weapon Case 2's success. One last thing that I want to bring up is going to be quantity analysis, and this is going to apply to all cases that are pretty much on the front page of Steam or don't fall into one of the previous categories that I talked about. Quantity analysis sounds a little bit more complicated than it actually is. All you really got to do is look at how much of the quantity of the case is actually on the marketplace and then compare its price to that quantity and see if it makes sense. Obviously, you have to cross-apply these quantities to other cases, but overall, you're going to see a pretty solid picture. When you're doing your quantity analysis, it'll probably inevitably lead you to the Shadow case. So the Shadow case has around 126,000 quantity, and for its price, that's really, really low amounts of quantity compared to other cases that are pretty popular. So if you actually look at the Shadow Web case, for example, that went up to around $3.50, and even though it is unobtainable in-game, unlike the Shadow case was at that price with a third of the quantity that the Shadow case had. So the Shadow case is at a really good spot right now and could do some insane things in the future, so make sure you don't sleep on it. So to reiterate the main factors for cases being a successful investment, just make sure you're looking for a few things. First of all, make sure you're doing quantity analysis, which is basically where you look at the quantity compared to the price of the case and cross-apply that to other quantities and prices of other cases on the marketplace. You'll be able to reveal a lot of secrets about the market for cases just by doing this simple trick, and it's going to be able to provide you a lot of great investment decisions if you do that. Another important thing to do is going to be looking at the contents of each case. So for example, with the Shadow case, you have the Kill Confirmed, which is a very, very beloved skin in the game. You also, though, have the Shadow Daggers as a guaranteed drop, which are a very unliked knife, and that's actually probably why the Shadow case is not so popular and why it's probably not on the front page of Steam. When it comes to analyzing the contents of a case, you're going to want to make sure you're looking for a few things. Obviously, one of the main ones is going to be a cheap trade-up. So for example, the Op Atheris or AK Rat Rod are both really cheap trade-ups that people can do for a large margin of profit. So is going to really increase the interest in the case itself. Another really important factor is going to be the reds in the case, the coverts. So for stuff like the Shadow case, it has, of course, the USP kill confirmed, which is a really amazing skin and one that a lot of people choose as their main USP skin, which is why there's a pretty big draw for the Shadow case in terms of that skin, at least itself. It does have the Shadow daggers as its knife though, which is very undesirable compared to something like the Breakout case where it has the butterfly knife as a guaranteed drop, which makes it a very desirable case and a very expensive one at that. Now, one more important note before this video closes off is going to be my recommended case investments and also going to be a note on cases that I didn't talk about specifically. So when it comes to cases that I didn't talk about specifically, those are going to be ones like the clutch case, for example, is a pretty popular one. The reason I don't talk about these is because there's usually a better option when it comes to either quantity analysis or contents analysis. The clutch case is a really solid one for gloves, and it does put it in a little interesting niche, so if you want to look at it for that, you can go ahead and do that. But that's just going to be my opinion. I don't think it's going to be the best option. So basically, if I didn't talk about a case, there's probably a more optimal option that you aren't looking at. I want you guys to be able to learn how to invest and not just have me hand you fish in terms of the items that you could buy. So I want to make sure that you guys understand that you have to go and actually do some of this on your own if you want to learn how to invest for the long term. That being said, I actually think that there's a few cases that are going to be interesting investments, and I am going to give you a couple fish when it comes to telling you which ones those are. I think that the Shadow case, the Phoenix case, and the Breakout case are all going to be really solid options. The Shadow Web case and the Hydra case are going to be really good long-term options, and the cases like the Weapon Case 2 are also going to be really good long-term options, albeit a little bit more expensive. As for the Weapon Case 1 and Bravo case, those are both going to be pretty much reserved to people that are going to put more money into investing in cases, but they are really solid options and are exceedingly rare. Overall, my top three would be the Shadow case, the Phoenix case, and the Shadow Web case. So if you want to go ahead and buy into those, I would definitely not say it's a bad option from my point of view, but maybe you want to look a bit more into it and figure something out yourself. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully it gave you a pretty clear idea of how cases work now and how they work as investments. If you guys want to go ahead and leave me a like if it did clear up things for you, then be sure to do that as well. And also be sure to subscribe to the channel for the fastest and best investment tips anywhere else on YouTube. I have been doing a pretty weird upload schedule recently, about a video a week, which I'm not really a big fan of, and I do want to actually increase video production, so I am going to go ahead and switch over to a more solid upload schedule, which I'm going to be announcing on YouTube on a little community post pretty soon here. If you want to check out the sponsor Skinport and also check out my social media links, be sure to do that by going to the description below. And with that said, thank you guys for watching. Peace.